Hello, good evening. Welcome to another episode of the Awakening Report. Tonight, we are going to take a look at the New Jerusalem. Now, the New Jerusalem is really what we would call heaven. It's that place that has the streets of gold, it's got the pearly gates. It's going to be awesome, and it's really going to be a wonderful place. And it is the city of God. So God dwells there right now. And one day, that city is going to come down to planet Earth. But there's some questions about that. What does it look like? Some people think maybe it's a cube. Some people, like me, think it's more like a mountain or a pyramid. So we're going to take a look at this question and look at some different features about the city. I will be taking your questions afterward. So hang on. And by the way, if you haven't already subscribed, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the little notification so that you get the notification when a new show comes out. And thank you, everyone, for just for the comments. I do read them, and I want you guys to know that I really enjoy reading the comments most of the time, not always, but most of the time, depending. And by the way, for those people that watch and that take some offense to this thing, yeah, I do think the Earth is round. So uh, anyway, that's just that's where I'm going to stand on that one. So speaking of the shape of things, let's talk about the New Jerusalem and whether it is a cube or a pyramid. Now, you might say, well, wait a second. I've read the Bible and I'm pretty sure it says that it's a cube. Well, hold on. It's really not that simple. Let's take a look and we will see what the evidence suggests. I'm going to argue that the New Jerusalem is actually shaped like a mountain or a pyramid. Okay. And I'll explain why I think that. So, is it is this going to be what it's going to be like that we're going to have the New Jerusalem, something this big, gigantic thing, really quite an eyesore on planet Earth? That's one way you can interpret it. I think there's another way to read it that actually does much more justice to the text. And I don't think we're going to ever be seeing something like this, the Borg ship coming down to planet Earth and about to take over, and just this massive, gigantic. I mean, the new city is huge. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think that it's unproportionate to or disproportionate to planet Earth. And let's take a look here. So, according to the constable's commentary, he says this description of the city could allow for either a cube or a pyramid shape, the shape of a Babylonian ziggurat. The fact that the Holy of Holies was as a cube tempts one to conclude that the New Jerusalem will also be a cube in shape, but this is speculation. Okay, so that's according to Thomas Constable. So I throw that out there just so you can get an idea that it's not absolutely certain in everyone's mind. It's not a foregone conclusion that the New Jerusalem is going to be a cube. I think that it's more like a mountain shape. And I have here two mountains that you can look at that really give you an idea of what I would suggest the New Jerusalem will be like in shape. Okay, now it's going to look different than these mountains, of course, but it's going to be similar to those in shape. And I think that it's really more like this, that it's going to be like this. And we can imagine that God is on the top of this thing and that he is the one who is up there illuminating the entire, well, I don't know about the entire planet, but certainly illuminating the entire area around there. And that is, I think this is much more appropriate to what the Bible is talking about. So let's get into the text. First of all, we see that Mount Zion and the city of God are equated with the New Jerusalem. And the name of the city of my God, the New Jerusalem, which comes down out of heaven from my God. All right, so the city of God is also the New Jerusalem. Now, that should be fairly simple, I believe, but just to be clear, that we're talking about one and the same thing. All right, in Hebrews 12:22, but you have come to Mount Zion and to the city of the living God. All right, so let's stop right there. And the city of the living God. So we now have a correlation. We saw in Revelation 3:12 that the city of God is the New Jerusalem. And according to Hebrews, Mount Zion is the city of the living God. And then we have one more phrase here, the heavenly Jerusalem. All right, so we know that Mount Zion, the city of the living God, and the heavenly Jerusalem are all one and the same place. Three different ways to describe the same place. And we see in in Galatians 4:26, but the Jerusalem above is free, which is the mother of us all. So there is a Jerusalem that's up in a different realm right now. We cannot see it, no matter how far we look out into the universe. We won't see this thing. It is behind some kind of a veil, which I talked about in the last video. And well, yeah, I talked about it in the second coming of the Battle of Armageddon. So if you haven't seen that, go ahead and check it out. All right, so the mountain of Zion is the New Jerusalem. So this is the mountain which God desires to dwell on. Yes, the Lord will dwell in it forever, according to Psalm 68:16. And Psalm 132, for the Lord has chosen Zion. He has desired it for his dwelling place. This is my resting place forever. Here I will dwell, for I have desired it. So what these are alluding to is that there is a New Jerusalem that currently occupies a place in a dimensional and a dimension that we cannot see, we cannot get there, but it's a dimension that I believe is directly over the earthly Jerusalem. So, if you go and stand in Jerusalem, Israel today, where you can fly to there and you can go and stand on the Temple Mount, that the New Jerusalem is directly above. Now, can we see it? No, of course not. We can't, because it's in a different dimension. And that's where Paul says that it's the Jerusalem that is above is free. So it's directly above that same place. But it's going to come down when the veil between heaven and earth is removed. The question is asked, who may ascend into the mountain of the Lord? Who may stand in his holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart, who has not lifted up his soul to an idol nor sworn deceitfully. So again, we have this idea of this mountain. Now, looking at where Satan was back in Ezekiel 28, you were in Eden, the garden of God. You were the anointed cherub who covers. I established you. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked back and forth in the midst of fiery stones. So where was Satan? Well, he was on the holy mountain of God. We've already established that mountain is the New Jerusalem. It is the city of God. It's the same place. And according to Ezekiel 28, the holy mountain of God was very close, perhaps in the same vicinity, maybe the same exact area. I can't say with exact precision, but these were very closely related. The holy mountain of God and the garden of God. Eden, the garden of God. Now, who else was in Eden? Well, of course, Adam and Eve. They were in Eden. So, what this gives us a clue about is that the New Jerusalem somehow occupied a dimensional space on planet Earth before the fall of man. And then when Adam and Eve sinned and they were kicked out of the Garden of Eden and they were barred from going to the tree of life, that it became invisible. It was no longer accessible from our dimension. And a day is coming when they are going to be reunited. Well, John tells us that he flew over this mountain, and it says, and he carried me away in the spirit. Now, the word here is epi, okay? And I just want you to see that this word, strangely, I don't know why, but in the English translation, it says he carried me away to a great and high mountain. But this word is epi, all right? And this is just one of your basic prepositions in Greek. And it means over, above, or on. And you can look that up. I mean, that's what it means. And just, I don't know how else to tell you. That's what it means. It means over, above, or on. It doesn't mean to. There's different words for that. So I don't know why the translators did that. It's a little strange. So I've put in the Greek word there for you to check out, and what is the English gloss, which is over, above, or on. And he showed me the great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God. All right, so John is getting a flyover. He's getting to this angel is picking him up, and he's getting to fly over this. Now, why is this significant? Because he's flying over a great and high mountain, and he showed me the great city. So this high mountain, this great and high mountain, is the city, the holy Jerusalem. It's the same place. These are all one and the same place. Now, a few centuries earlier, Ezekiel got a glimpse at the city, but he didn't get to fly over it. He got to look toward it. In the visions of God, he took me into the land of Israel and set me toward. There's the Hebrew word el, which means to or toward, to a very high mountain. On it toward the south was something like the structure of a city. So Ezekiel is taken into the land of Israel and he is set toward. So the angel puts him down and he's now facing a high mountain. And what is on this high mountain? The structure of a city. What is he looking at? He's looking at the New Jerusalem. What does the New Jerusalem look like? It looks like a mountain. All right, it looks like a mountain. Now, this doesn't make it impossible for it to be some kind of a cube, but it seems pretty unlikely that you're going to have a cube, especially when you have this high mountain and there's something like the structure of a city. So you can imagine a pyramid kind of shape, and rising up, you have these turrets, these towers, maybe some buildings that are coming up out of the sides of this pyramid. And that is the picture that we get. So again, think of a basic pyramid, and then from the sides of this, or on the slopes, you have towers and whatnot that are coming up out of the city. So I would suggest that the New Jerusalem is a pyramid shape and it's not a cube. It's a pyramid. I believe a pyramid fits much better. Now, consider this, that the artificial holy mountains of the world, I would suggest that they are a counterfeit of the real thing. So we have the pyramids of Egypt. We have the ziggurats of Babylon. And of course, we have pyramids of the Mayas, etc. We have pyramids all over the world. And of course, we have the pyramid on the back of the dollar bill. And who's on top of that dollar bill? Well, it's not God, as far as we understand. That's talking about Satan. And Satan believes as above, so below. As above, so below. So on the back of your dollar bill, if you haven't seen this, take one out, look at it, and you'll see a pyramid. The top is truncated, and there's an eye up there. It's called the all-seeing eye. And in Latin, it's written, Anuit Cuptus Novus Ordo Seclorum. So it's announcing the conception of the New World Order, right? And Satan wants to be on top of that. Why? Because as above, so below. So if he wants to be on top of the pyramid, well, that tells us that there must be a pyramid up in the heavenly area, because God's reality, the original New Jerusalem, where Satan got kicked out of, is what he wants to ascend to and once again be king of the hill. Of course, that's not going to happen except in his dreams, but that's what he wants. And so we have copies, counterfeits on earth, where you have other kind of pagan worship that's going on, sacrifices that are happening up here to the gods, as it were, because they want to, they see themselves on top of this pyramid, on top of the holy mountain, when in fact God is the only one who can be on the holy mountain. All right, let's take a look at the size of the city, its walls, and its gates. These are all important clues for us to understand. So according to Ezekiel, he says, a man whose appearance was like the appearance of bronze. He had a line of flax and a measuring rod in his hand. Well, when we compare this with Revelation 21, it says, and he had a gold reed to measure the city, its gates, and its wall. The city is laid out as a square. Its length is as great as its breadth. And he measured the city with the reed, 12,000 stadia. Its length, breadth, and height are equal. Then he measured its wall, 144 cubits. So it's interesting here that both of these angels have a measuring rod. They're to measure. Now, what John gives us is we get the measurement of the wall, and we get the measurement of the city, but we're never told the measurement of the gates. So that's an interesting little fact that we'll have to tuck away for a little bit and come back to that later. But what does he tell us? That the city is laid out as a square. Okay, so That's pretty clear. It's laid out as a square. So think of a base. It's got four sides. They're all equal. That's a square. And he measured the city with the reed. It was 12,000 stadia. Its length, breadth, and height are equal. So what that tells us is let's just make things easier, just to make it in really simple terms here. Let's say that it's 100 miles on each side. All right, just for simplicity. I'm not saying that, but just to make it simple. So that means that if it's 100 on one side, it has to also be 100 on the other side, and it has to be 100 miles tall. Well, a pyramid can do the same thing. It doesn't only have to be a cube. A cube is one way to fulfill that, but a pyramid can do that just as well. A pyramid can do that just as well. And let's think about that wall for a second. If you have a cube and the cube has walls that are going straight up and down, where are you going to put the wall? I mean, there's really no need for the wall. And those pictures that we looked at with the cubes, I mean, of course, those are only artistic renditions, but there's no place for a wall because the entire thing would be a wall if it's a cube. But if you have a pyramid, a mountain shape, well, now you have sloping sides. They're going up to a peak. And now you can see why there would be a wall. Now it makes sense to have a wall. Only a mountain makes sense to have a wall. A cube does not make any sense because that already is a wall. So let's take a look here. Well, some commentators on the size of the city have said, of course, this cannot be understood literally, and the very idea of a literal fulfillment of this shows the absurdity of that method of interpretation. Well, you know, why would that be, Albert Barnes? Why is that so terrible to take this literally? Again, I think there's different ways to look at this. So 12,000 stadia is 1,376 miles, I believe. So the question is each side 1,376 miles, or is that the sum total of all the sides? I'm going to suggest that the 12,000 stadia, or 1,376 miles, is the sum total of the sides. And I'm going to show you why in a little bit. According to Robertson's word pictures, he says it is useless to try to reduce the measurements or to put literal interpretations upon this highly wrought symbolic language. Surely the meaning is that heaven will be large enough for all. Again, I would suggest, very humbly suggest, that these two great commentators have missed the boat here. They're thinking rather woodenly instead of taking a deeper look at what is possible. And I think when we understand how things were measured, how you put things into when you put things on paper as far as measurements, that this is entirely possible. Sorry about that. So it is not clear whether the 1,500 miles, now again, I would suggest that it's not quite that much, 12,000 furlongs is the measurement of each of the four sides or the sum total. So that's according to Jameson, Fawcett, and Brown. I think that they're onto something. In fact, I would say it's more than just the four sides. It also includes the height. So you have to take all of those into account really to understand. So 12,000 stadia, 1,380 miles. So I was off a couple miles there. So is that each side or the sum total? Well, some of the rabbis have argued that the walls of the New Jerusalem of Ezekiel would reach to Damascus. That's according to Robertson Word Pictures. So I did a little calculation here. The distance between Jerusalem and Damascus is 132 miles, according to Google Earth. So that gives us at least an idea of the ballpark that we should be looking at, 132 miles. Now, according to Herodotus, the Greek historian, he's given us a picture of Babylon in his day, and he says that the city was a great square, 42 miles in circuit. All right, so 42 miles doesn't mean that it was 42 miles on each side. It means that it was 42 miles all the way around. All right, so I would suggest that John was doing the same thing. When he gives us that 1,380 miles, he's not giving us each side, so it'd be 1,380 cubed. That is what a lot of people suggest. But I would say that you have this 1,380 is the sum total of all the sides. I think that makes a lot more sense. Now, when we think about a pyramid has 8 edges. So I submit that if we take the 1,380 and divide that by 8, we come up with a number that is much more reasonable and believable. So 1,380 divided by 8 gives us approximately 172.5 miles. So, each edge there, each measure, or each of the 8 edges of the pyramid would equal about 172 or 173 miles. So that is a city that would still be enormous, but it would fit into planet Earth a whole lot better. Now you have a structure that's still gigantic, but it's not obscenely big, like 1,380 miles tall. I mean, that's going way out into outer space. I mean, it's so big. I mean, way, way, way out into space. And it almost becomes this very weird artificial structure that, as we've seen, the cube just doesn't fit. So when we take a look at it, the 1,380 I believe, is going to be the sum total, and so we're still looking at a gigantic city. If you think about it, that is still 5 or 6 times taller than Mount Everest. All right, so it's still huge, 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 huge. Excuse me, I'm sorry, my bad. It's about 30 times bigger than Mount Everest. Mount Everest is about roughly 5.5 miles tall. So we have still a gigantic city, about 30 times taller. Now, the foundations are made of precious stones, according to Isaiah 54. O you afflicted one, tossed with tempest and not comforted, behold, I will lay your stones with colorful gems and lay your foundations with sapphires. I will make your pinnacles of rubies, your gates of crystal, and all your walls of precious stones. When we compare this with Revelation 21, we see that it says the construction of its wall was of jasper and the city of pure gold, like clear glass. The foundations of the wall of the city were adorned with all kinds of precious stones. The first foundation was jasper, the second foundation, sapphire. The 12 gates were 12 pearls, and the street of the city was pure gold, like transparent glass. We have then 12 gates. Again, we see this both in Ezekiel and in Revelation. The gates of the city shall be named after the tribes of Israel. The 3 gates northward on the east side, on the south side, on the west side, the name of the city from that day shall be, the Lord is there. Yehovah Shammah. Yehovah Shammah. That means that God himself is going to be there. And we know that the city of God is where God dwells. So this is the same exact city. We can't suggest that it's anything else when they're exactly the same description. Notice in Revelation 21, also she had a great and high wall with 12 gates and 12 angels at the gates, and 12 the names on them written on them, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. 3 gates on the east, 3 gates on the north, 3 gates on the south, and 3 gates on the west. Now, I said, what about the gates? Because the angel went out to measure the city, its gates, and its wall. And we got the measure of the city and its wall, but we did not get the measure of the gates. So that's something we're still looking into. So how big are the gates of the city? Well, in Revelation 21:13 and Ezekiel 48:33, we see that we have the 3 gates. So these are exactly the same description. And these are the exits of the city on the north side, measuring 4,500 rods, which is the Hebrew word there, midah, each being a cubit and a handbreadth. So 1 cubit is 20.63 inches, and a rod is 6 cubits. That equals 123.78 inches, or 10.31 feet. So the total length of the gates per side is 46,395 feet. And since there are 3 gates per side, that means that each gate equals 2.92 miles. So these are enormous gates. We're going to round it up to 3 miles just to make it simple for us. So each gate is 3 miles across. Now that's not a problem, because they're never going to close these gates, and these are not. We don't imagine doors on these because they're always going to be open. I mean, maybe there are doors, but these are the doorways, if you will, the doorways. And these are enormous, 2.92 or 3 miles for each gate. Wow, these are really, really huge. And of course, the gates are always open. According to Isaiah, therefore your gates shall be open continually. They shall not be shut day or night, that men may bring to you the wealth of the Gentiles and their kings and procession. Its gates shall not be shut at all by day. There shall be no night there, and they shall bring the glory and the honor of the nations into it. Same exact thing that we have here. Now, just a little side note. Somebody recently has said that they think the book of Revelation is completely false. I was a little shocked, but really, if you take a look at the book of Revelation, you'll see that it doesn't have that many new things in it. It's nice and compact. It's laid out nicely for us, so it gives us a nice overview. But you'll find almost everything that is in the book of Revelation has already been stated in other places. So, of course, there's a few things here and there, but these are not brand new revelations. These are things that have already been revealed, and then John, or the book of Revelation, brings it all together for us in one book, and that's what's so great about the book of Revelation. Well, in this city, there will be no more tears. He will swallow up death forever, and the Lord God will wipe away tears from all faces. The rebuke of his people he will take away from all the earth, for the Lord has spoken. God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There shall be no more death, nor sorrow, nor crying. There shall be no more pain, for the former things have passed away. So Isaiah 25 and Revelation 21 both say the same thing. Again, John has just given it to us in one book in a different format, which is really handy, but we're looking at the same thing. And going on with this idea in Isaiah 65:19, I will rejoice in Jerusalem and joy in my people. The voice of weeping shall no longer be heard in her, nor the voice of crying. Jeremiah 31, their soul shall be like a well-watered garden, and they shall sorrow no more at all. And of course, Revelation 7, God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. And the ransom of the Lord shall return and come to Zion with singing, with everlasting joy in their heads. They shall obtain joy and gladness and sorrow, and sighing shall flee away. Beautiful. Also, there'll be no more hunger or thirst in this area, this place. So I've put both of these together so you can get a good look at them and see that these are talking about the same thing. They shall neither hunger nor thirst, neither heat nor sun shall strike them. For he who has mercy on them will lead them, even by the springs of water. He will guide them. And the Lord God will wipe away tears from all faces. So this is Isaiah 25:8 and Isaiah 4:6. And then in Revelation 7:16 and 17, they shall neither hunger nor anymore, nor thirst anymore. The sun shall not strike them, nor any heat. For the Lamb who is in the midst of the throne will shepherd them and lead them to living fountains of waters. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. These are exactly parallel in what they're saying, almost word for word in what they say. So we can see that Revelation, or John here writing the book of Revelation, is heavily borrowing from other places in Scripture. Now, I would suggest that he's not simply borrowing, but that he had this incredible vision of things to come. And God, in giving him this revelation, this vision, brought in all these things that have already been revealed. So we're looking at one and the same place. These are both the same. Now, God will illuminate the city. This is really exciting because there's a misnomer that the sun and the moon are going to go away because they're no longer needed. But it's true, they're not needed in the city, but that doesn't mean that the sun and the moon will go away. So let's just take a look here. It says, moreover, the light of the moon will be as the light of the sun, and the light of the sun will be sevenfold, and the light of 7 days as the light of 7 days, in the day that the Lord binds up the bruise of his people and heals the stroke of their wound. And Isaiah 24, then the moon will be disgraced and the sun ashamed, for the Lord of hosts will reign on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem and before his elders gloriously. And then if we compare this with Zechariah 14:7 and also 2 Peter 3:8, it says, it shall be one day which is known to the Lord, neither day nor night, but at evening time it shall happen that it will be light. So there will still be the light of the moon and the sun. They will be brighter, in fact. But in the same book, Isaiah 24, we're told that the moon will be disgraced and the sun ashamed. Why? Because the Lord of hosts will reign on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem. So imagine just for a second that you have this wonderful, top-notch, mega flashlight. You got it for, Christmas or Hanukkah, whatever. You got this thing, and it's an awesome flashlight. What happens when you take that super bright flashlight outside on a bright day? Well, it's kind of wimpy, isn't it? That super bright flashlight is nothing compared to the light of the sun. Well, the same thing will be true of the sunlight. It will be nothing compared to the light of God himself. So it doesn't mean that the sun and the moon are going to be destroyed. No, rather, they will still be there. They'll be brighter, in fact, but their light will be nothing compared to God's light. So that's really important to understand. So the New Jerusalem will not need the light of the sun or the light of the moon. But the New Jerusalem is only going to be on one side of planet Earth. It's going to be obviously on the Jerusalem, the Israel side. So everything on the other side of the planet would theoretically still need the sun and the moon. And these are things that God said he'll never go away. So the city had no need. The city, not the new creation, not heaven as it were, but the city had no need of the sun or of the moon to shine in it. For the glory of God illuminated it. The Lamb is its light. So we're only talking about the city. We're not saying that the sun and the moon go away. And then we see in Revelation 22, there shall be no night there. Where? In the city. They need no lamp nor light of the sun in the city. For the Lord God gives them light, and they shall reign forever and ever. So absolutely, God himself will be reigning over the city. He'll be sitting there on his throne. I would presume on the very top of this, because that's where Satan wanted to ascend, was to the top of the mountain. And so God will be sitting up there, reigning gloriously. And of course, his light is brighter than the light of the sun. So the city will not need the sun and the moon, but the other side of the planet will most certainly need the sun and the moon, unless, light begins to bend all the way around, which, I suppose that's possible, but it seems unlikely. So in summary, the veil or the old heavens are gone. Again, the veil it's like a force field between heaven and earth. It's something that we cannot see, and it's going to be gone. It's going to go away, and all will be exposed to God's fire and plasma. Excuse the typo, it should be a capital G, of course. But everyone will be exposed to God's fire and their plasma. The earth is going to be destroyed at the second coming. And there is no intermediate millennial heavens and earth. There are only two sets. And it's going to be recreated at the beginning of the millennium. And the mountain of God is the New Jerusalem on the earth. And God's throne is in the city. So those are just some of the summaries that we've seen so far. And keep in mind also that sin and death will be possible outside the New Jerusalem. There shall by no means enter it anything that defiles or causes an abomination or a lie, but only those who are written in the Lamb's book of life. So what does this tell us? That if you are not born again, if you don't have your new body, you cannot go into the New Jerusalem. But that doesn't mean that there won't be people outside the city who are not born again, who do not have their new body. In fact, the text tells us very clearly, Revelation 22:14, outside the city are dogs and sorcerers and sexually immoral and murderers and idolaters and whoever loves and practices a lie. So outside the New Jerusalem, you still have these people that are no good, people that for whatever reason have chosen the wrong path. And this is how they are known as. So this is during the millennium when this takes place, when you have these people outside the city. But where is the city? The city is on planet Earth during the millennium. Very important to understand this. And once you get the city on the earth during the millennium, then all of these scriptures start to make sense. We don't have to try to excuse why it doesn't make sense here or there. They all make sense. And we're told that death is still possible, which of course now makes sense with Revelation 22. Rather than saying, well, if Revelation 22, we're talking about the eternal state when everything has been done over and we're way past the 1,000 years. You say, well, who are these people? Well, that's just the people who are in hell. Well, that's not what it says. That there will still be people outside. In fact, we're told that death is still possible, and the one who dies will be considered a sinner. He'll be accursed. So you still have the possibility of people dying in that era. Now, the New Jerusalem is going to come down to planet Earth, and then we're going to go into the marriage supper of the Lamb. The marriage supper of the Lamb does not take place during the tribulation as our pre-tribulational rapture brothers would suggest. Now, I used to believe that, so let's give them some grace here because I was in that same boat. But again, just looking at this topic for years, I realized no, that just doesn't make sense. And of course, Israel is really what it's all about. So we have to put all these things together. Well, we've looked at this passage already. Let's look at it again. That the New Jerusalem is the Jerusalem above, which Paul talks about. He says, "For this corresponds to Jerusalem, which now is, but the Jerusalem above is free, which is the mother of us all." So this veil is going to pass away between heaven and earth. Okay, so check out that cool graphic again. The veil is going to pass away per Isaiah 25:7 and 2 Peter 3:10. Now, this veil is something that we cannot see. We can't go and measure it. We don't have any instrumentation to detect it, so far as I know. But it's there. And again, I showed this in other passages, in other presentations as well, that there is a veil between heaven and earth. We'll call it a force field or something like that. It's going to pass away. And when it does, these two become one again. The dimension of earth and the dimension of God's throne room of the New Jerusalem will become one once again. And that New Jerusalem that is sitting right above the earthly Jerusalem is going to come down. Well, what about the earthly Jerusalem? Well, it's going to be destroyed. So no problem. All of those, buildings there, all that history, I'm sorry, it's going to be destroyed. And the New Jerusalem will come and sit on this place. And now that we see the dimensions of the city, this makes a lot more sense. Now, it's still a gigantic city, about 173 miles square and 173 miles tall. So it's still a phenomenally huge city, but it's not something that's 1,380 miles out into space. This is something that it fits a lot better. And notice what Isaiah says: "I will rejoice in Jerusalem and joy in my people. The voice of weeping shall no longer be heard in her, nor the voice of crying." Of course, God, he's speaking for God there. Well, and God is going to prepare the bride for the people. "For he, Abraham, waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. But now they desire a better, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. In my Father's house are many mansions. I go to prepare a place for you," Jesus tells us. So the millennial Jerusalem and the heavenly Jerusalem are one and the same. In the city of our God, in his holy mountain, beautiful in elevation, the joy of the whole earth is Mount Zion on the sides of the north, the city of the great King. Again in Hebrews, "You have come to Mount Zion and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, to an innumerable company of angels." And God divorced not only his people, but also the Jerusalem. "Bring charges against your mother, Jerusalem. Bring charges, for she is not my wife, nor am I her husband. Let her put away her harlotries from her sight. And I will destroy her vines and her fig trees, of which she has said." And then God says, "Oh, Judah, a harvest is appointed for you when I return the captives of my people." And he's going to bring together. Now, this is where it gets a little bit confusing, because it seems that God marries a city, and of course he marries a people. And what I'd like to suggest is that when you think of, let's say, New York City, when you have New York City, what do you think of New York City? You think of big buildings, you think of that place over there on the East Coast, and you think of the New Yorkers, the people themselves. You need all three places. You need the infrastructure, of course, the geography, and the people. You cannot have a city without any one of those three. Can you have a city without infrastructure? Well, that's pretty hard to do. Can you have a city without people? Well, that's called a ghost town. And can you have a city without a geographical location? Well, that's, of course, impossible. You've got to be located somewhere. So when we think of a city, I believe that God is going to marry the New Jerusalem, as it says in Revelation 21. But he's not just marrying, a bunch of buildings and some place, but it's the people that will inhabit that city. So when it says he's going to marry this city, it's the people that's the relationship. Everything else is just an added bonus. The beautiful place, the streets of gold, that's all wonderful. God's not impressed by that. Of course, we're talking about the people. But so when we talk about the city, we're talking about the marriage to the people inside the city, but it's a complete package. It's really a complete package. If we say, well, we made a deal with the people of, or we made a deal with, uh, you know, with Ecuador. Okay. Well, we're not just talking about the land. We're not just talking about the trees and the buildings there. We're talking about the people that inhabit that space. So God's throne is on the earth during the millennium. God's throne is going to be there. He says, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, but for it is God's throne. Matthew 5:4, Jesus says. And then immediately I was in the spirit, behold, a throne set in heaven, and one sat on the throne, and from the throne proceeded lightnings, thunderings, and voices. 7 lamps of fire were burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. Whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to him who sits on the throne, who lives forever and ever. So God's throne is in this place. This is another reason why we have to see that the New Jerusalem comes down on planet Earth, because God is going to dwell among his people, as he tells us many places in the Hebrew Bible, especially the book of Ezekiel. Looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Well, that's, of course, in the New Jerusalem. Therefore, they are before the throne of God, and serve him day and night in his temple, and he who sits on the throne will dwell among them. And in their mouth was found no deceit, for they are without fault before the throne of God. Well, let's keep looking here. Jeremiah 3:7. At that time, Jerusalem shall be called the throne of the Lord, and all the nations shall be gathered to it. To the name of the Lord, to Jerusalem, there shall no more shall they follow the dictates of their evil hearts. So Jerusalem is going to be the place where God's throne is. And he said to me, son of man, this is the place of my throne and the place of the soles of my feet, where I will dwell in the midst of the children of Israel forever. So what we see here is that God's throne, which is clearly in the New Jerusalem, is also going to be the place of his throne that will be in the midst of the children of Israel forever. All right, not just for a little while, but forever. So if Ezekiel 43 is talking about the millennium, and I believe that it is, that means that the city cannot be circling planet Earth, as some people suggest, but the city has actually come down to planet Earth because things have been brought back together. And this is why I have suggested that the new heavens and the new earth happen at the beginning of the millennium, not at the end. Because when the new heavens and the new earth come at the beginning of the millennium, and we have the New Jerusalem coming down at the beginning of the millennium, now all these scriptures that we didn't know where to put them, or we relegated those for the Jews or for Israel. No, they're for us, because we're part of that group. We're part of Israel. We don't replace the Jews. We become part of the 12 tribes of Israel, not just the tribe of Judah, but of the 12 tribes. We become part of that. We're grafted in. And now we get to be part of this, and God is going to be with his people in the midst of the children of Israel forever. So forever pretty much means forever. It's not just for a little while until, we want to change our theology. It's forever. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne. God, his throne, yes, it's movable, but it is in Jerusalem. It's in the New Jerusalem, as a matter of fact. Of course, Isaiah saw God sitting on a throne high and lifted up. The Lord is in his holy temple. The Lord's throne is in heaven. His eyes behold, his eyelids test the sons of men. Your throne, O God, is forever and ever. A scepter of righteousness is the scepter of your kingdom. And then I watched till thrones were put in place, and the Ancient Days was seated. His garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head was like pure wool. His throne was a fiery flame, its wheels a burning fire. This is talking about God Almighty, who will be on his throne, and it will be on planet Earth, because the New Jerusalem comes down to planet Earth. And then, of course, in Revelation, proceeding from the throne of God and the Lamb, there shall be no more curse, but the throne of God, and the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him. So we see that the throne of God is in the New Jerusalem. It's not just floating around, the planet, but it's in the New Jerusalem. And yet we see that same throne is on planet Earth during the millennium. So that means that the New Jerusalem has to be on planet Earth, because that's where the throne of God is. That's the only way to make it all fit. And he who swears by heaven swears by the throne of God and by him who sits on it. Well, God dwells forever on Mount Zion. Out of Zion, the perfection of beauty, God will shine forth. There again, we see this shining, as we've seen these other scriptures that validate that, and of course tell us that the sun and the moon will be ashamed because of God's glory will be there. And God shall come and will not keep silent. A fire shall devour before him. So, for the Lord has chosen Zion. He's desired it for his dwelling place. This is my resting place forever. Here I will dwell, God says. Many people shall come and say, come and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord. There's that mountain, the mountain that is the New Jerusalem. This is during the millennium. And we shall walk in his paths, for out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. That is the New Jerusalem. That's what he's talking about here in Isaiah chapter 2. The Lord loves the gates of Zion more than all the dwellings of Jacob. O city of God, all my springs are in you. Arise and let us go up to Zion to the Lord our God. So this is going to be on Mount Ephraim. They will cry, hey, let's go up to the mountain of the Lord. What is the mountain of the Lord? Up to Zion? It's none other than the New Jerusalem. And that New Jerusalem is going to be on planet Earth. We also see that God will dwell in Zion before his elders. In Isaiah 24:23, for the Lord of hosts will reign on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem and before his elders gloriously. Compare that with Revelation 4:4. Around the throne were 24 thrones, and on the thrones I saw 24 elders. So this is the same the same talk that we have here. Now, what John gave us is the number of the elders. In Isaiah, we're just told elders. But in Revelation, now we see that it's 24 elders. So that was a missing piece of information. We didn't know how many, but we knew that there'd be elders per Isaiah 24. And the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, and the 24 elders of the four living creatures worship God who sat on the throne. Again, these are all one and the same. The throne is in the New Jerusalem, and the New Jerusalem is on planet Earth during the millennium. And God himself will be in the city. Arise, shine, for your light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon you, Jerusalem. You can see verse 13. For behold, the darkness shall cover the earth, and deep darkness the people, but the Lord will rise over you, and his glory will be seen upon you. The Gentiles shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. So this passage here in Isaiah 60 is talking about the glory of the Lord. The glory of the Lord is what we have in Revelation 21, that there will be no need for the sun and the moon there because God's glory will illuminate the city. It's the same exact language. Once again, indicating that the New Jerusalem comes down to planet Earth at the beginning of the millennium. And when you look at it that way, it all fits together. Then you shall see and become radiant, and your heart shall swell with joy, because the abundance of the sea shall be turned to you, the wealth of the Gentiles shall come to you. Therefore your gates shall be open continually. They shall not be shut day or night, that men may bring the wealth of the Gentiles and their kings in procession. So once again, the gates are not going to be closed ever. God's glory is there. This is the same passage here in Isaiah 60. It's talking about this reality that the New Jerusalem is on planet Earth during the millennium. It will be there forever. And they shall call you the city of the Lord, Zion of the Holy One of Israel. The sun shall no longer be your light by day, nor for brightness shall the moon give you light. But the Lord will be to you an everlasting light, and your God to your glory, your glory. The sun shall no longer go down, nor shall your moon withdraw itself, for the Lord will be your everlasting light. Same thing as Revelation 21:23. The city had no need of the sun or of the moon to shine in it, for the glory of God illuminated it. The Lamb is its light. I don't want to be a broken record here, but the New Jerusalem comes down to planet Earth at the beginning, not at the end. That's what I was taught, is that it comes down after. And of course, basically the whole idea is that the New Jerusalem is kind of floating around. So it's, orbiting planet Earth. It's circling around planet Earth for 1,000 years. And the Christians are up in the New Jerusalem, and the Jews are down here on planet Earth. And we're always going to be kind of forever segregated between the two. But that's not what the Bible says. It's only dispensational theology that teaches that, but the Bible doesn't teach that. It says that these two become one again at the beginning of the millennium. And Jerusalem will dwell safely, and this is the name by which he should be called, the Lord our righteousness. Yehovah Tzidkenu is what this will be called, because he's there. For I will set my sanctuary in their midst forevermore. My tabernacle also shall be with them. Indeed, I will be their God, and they shall be my people. This is, of course, God said to the northern kingdom of Israel, you are no longer my people. I'm no longer your God. And now he's saying, hey, you're my people, and I'm your God again. A sanctuary is in their midst forevermore. So we can't have it any other way. God has to be there. The New Jerusalem has to be there. It's the only way to put it all together. God says, I will return to Zion and dwell in their midst in the midst of Jerusalem. Jerusalem shall be called the city of truth, the mountain of the Lord of hosts, the holy mountain. There you have it. That is the new Jerusalem, and it will be on planet Earth during the millennium and forever. This is the place of my throne and the place of the soles of my feet, where I will dwell in the midst of the children of Israel forever, and I will dwell in their midst forever. The name of the city from that day shall be, the Lord is there. You have a Shama. Sing and rejoice. I will dwell in your midst, says the Lord. And he says that, and he who sits on the throne will dwell among them. Same language. Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them. This is it. It's all the same place. So God is dwelling with man. Moreover, I will make a covenant of peace with them, and it shall be an everlasting covenant with them. I will establish them and multiply them, and I will set my sanctuary in their midst forevermore. My tabernacle, my Mishkan, also shall be with them. Indeed, I will be their God, and they shall be my people. The nations also will know that I, the Lord, sanctify Israel, when my sanctuary is in their midst forevermore. There's no way to get around this. He keeps saying forevermore, like maybe he means like forever, because I think he means to say that his sanctuary is going to be in their midst forever, in the midst of Israel. So how can it be that God is going to have his sanctuary in the midst of Israel if he is in the New Jerusalem circling the planet? Well, it just doesn't make sense. And of course, there's this other idea that, well, Jehovah God gets Israel and Jesus gets the church. But how many gods are we talking about? We're talking about one God. And how many brides are we talking about? I mean, does God the Father have a bride and then Jesus has a bride? I mean, so is it like two guys and two women? Or is it one God and one woman? I would submit that it's one God and one woman. That's the only way to put it all together. And it was really this study of the millennium that helped me to understand that we have to be part of Israel. We can't have this massive distinction between the church and between Israel. And that's what dispensational basically wants to do, is say, well, no, there's God has a covenant with Israel and God has a covenant with the church. And so that's, of course, for another study. If you want to check that out, I have a video called The Everlasting Covenant, why God's divorce and remarriage to Israel. So you can check that up. But these things all come together when we see who we're talking about and that God is going to be with Israel. So the marriage of the Lamb does not happen during the tribulation with the church while Israel is getting beat up on planet Earth. No. It will all happen when Jesus comes back. He sets up his throne. And of course, the New Jerusalem is coming down to planet Earth. God, the one God that we serve, is going to be with them forever, in their midst forevermore, and he will never go away. Again, the same thing in Revelation 7. You can check it out, my video, Why God Did Not Elect Calvinists, if you're interested in that. It just gives some other insights. And then lastly, the heavenly Jerusalem is going to descend. Here comes the bride. So you, Jerusalem, shall no longer be termed forsaken, nor shall your land anymore be termed desolate. But you shall be called Hephzibah, and your land Beulah. For the Lord delights in you, and your land shall be married. Now, notice there. Let's stop for a second. God is going to marry the land. You'd say, well, no, wait a second. How can God marry a piece of dirt? This doesn't make any sense. And he is talking about Jerusalem in this passage in Isaiah 62, 4-7. You shall no longer be termed forsaken, nor shall your land anymore be termed desolate, but you should be called Hephzibah. So, Hepsi is my delight, and Ba means in her. So he's talking about the city of Jerusalem. The word city in Hebrew is a feminine word, kind of like how we have in English. We talk about cities and boats and whatnot in the feminine. Same in Hebrew. Cities and countries are in the feminine. And so Hephzibah, his delight is in her, and your land, Beulah. To be Beulah means to be married, and it's the feminine form of it. So it's she is married. For the Lord delights in you, feminine singular, and your land shall be married. For as a young man marries a virgin, so shall your sons marry you. And as the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so shall your God rejoice over you, Jerusalem. I have set watchmen on your walls, O Jerusalem. There it is again. They shall never hold their peace day or night. You who make mention of the Lord, do not keep silent, and give him no rest till he establishes and until he makes Jerusalem a praise in the earth. Talking about the New Jerusalem. So God is going to marry the New Jerusalem, but it's not just the city. It's not just the walls and the gates and the buildings, and it's not just the location. It's the people in it. Of course, we're talking about all three aspects. All three aspects. And notice that this city has 3 gates on each side, each gate corresponding to the name of the children of Israel, not the church, but to Israel. This is why he marries it, because this was his goal from the beginning, to marry Israel. He married Israel back at Sinai. Of course, they kept cheating on him. The kingdom split into 2, north and south, until finally God said to the north, to the 10 tribes, to the house of Israel, I'm divorcing you. You're no longer my people. I'm no longer your God. And he says, but I will betroth you to me in righteousness forever. He says that in Hosea chapter 2. So this is the culmination of all those things. This is when it's all coming together now, of how God is going to remarry the 12 tribes, the nation of Israel, and the culmination will take place. The place of their residence will be in the New Jerusalem. And so he can truly say that he is married to the city. Again, not just to the bricks and to the gold streets, but it's to the people who occupy this place. They are the New Jerusalem, so to speak. But of course, the New Jerusalem is even more than the people. It's also the gates and the towers and all these beautiful things. Then I, John, saw the holy New Jerusalem coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. So the New Jerusalem is the bride. But this is, of course, where all the people are going to dwell. And then the angel says to John, I will show you the bride, the Lamb's wife. He carried me away in the spirit. And here it says over or above or upon, epi, a great mountain, great and high mountain, and showed me the great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of heaven from God. So I crossed out the word to, because that is what some of the translations say. Not sure why the word here is not to, but it's epi. So John got to fly over the city, and he got to see the bride. He got to see the New Jerusalem. He wasn't on a high mountain looking at the city. No, he was flying over the high mountain, which was the city. The high mountain and the city are one and the same thing. They're both the same thing. Now, this is all documented in these 3 videos. If you want to take a look at these, they are on YouTube. You can also get them at my store, douglashamp.com/store. So go ahead and check those out. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to take those questions now. So let me just go ahead and get out of the screen sharing, and I will now begin to take your questions. So give me 1 second here. And it looks like we have a bunch of questions. That's great. So, all right. All right. Okay. Do a good turn daily asks, what is the Hebrew definition of city? Well, the Hebrew word there is ir. It's really similar to what we would say in English, city. Again, think of, your favorite city, wherever you live. I live in Denver, so when I think of Denver, I think of some pretty buildings. I think of the mountains around it, but I also think of the people, because the people, the Broncos, and all these different things. These are what make up Denver. And of course, when you go to New York City, you think of big skyscrapers, and you think of New Yorkers, and they're talking funny. I won't try to do a New York accent, but they ask for coffee or whatever. The things that New Yorkers do, right? So that's New York, and where I live is Denver, and where you live is its own city. So the city is the infrastructure, the city is the location, the geography, but it's also the people. They all go together. Another question: the gates are hung huge, but the way is narrow. So confused. Well, the gates into the city are big, and they're never going to be closed, but it's impossible to enter in. And I'm going to explain that in another video as to what I believe people are going to try to do, what Satan is going to try to do as his last attempt to try to storm the gates of the city. I'll explain that later. All right, what about the temple? Great question. What about that temple? Well, I would suggest that the temple is currently in the New Jerusalem. We see passages in the book of Revelation that talk about there being a temple. In fact, John says that the angels could not go into the temple until all the plagues were done. So it was impossible for them for anybody to go in there until the last of the plagues were finished. This is in Revelation chapter 14. Let me just go ahead and pull this up. Excuse me, Revelation 15. There we go. So it says, after these things I looked, and behold, the tabernacle of the temple of the tabernacle of the testimony in heaven was opened. And out of the temple came the 7 angels, having the 7 plagues, clothed in pure bright linen, and having their chests girded with golden bands. So here you have it. It says the temple was filled with smoke from the glory of God and from his power, and no one was able to enter the temple till the 7 plagues of the 7 angels were completed. So if you compare that with Isaiah chapter 6, there Isaiah saw God high and lifted up, and it says in the train of his robe filled the temple. All right, so God is in a temple currently. He's in that temple. Jesus took his blood to that temple made without hands that is not of this creation, and he offered his blood there in that temple. So I would suggest that there is a temple in the New Jerusalem currently. Jesus also makes reference of that in Revelation chapter 3. And he says, to him who overcomes, I will make him a pillar in the temple of my God. So there is currently a New Jerusalem there. But what is going to happen to this temple? Because as we go later to Revelation 21, it's very clear, point blank, does John tell us that there is no temple. In fact, he says in verse 22, he says, but I saw no temple in it, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are its temple. So there was a temple, but now there isn't a temple. What happened? It's kind of like the old switcheroo. You had a temple, now there isn't a temple. Well, I would suggest that the temple is going to move. It's going to go from the New Jerusalem down to planet Earth. It will be on planet Earth. It will be operating. It will be essentially Ezekiel's temple. Ezekiel's temple is a picture of the temple that is currently in heaven. Now, that's my theory. I can't prove that absolutely, but that seems to be the only thing that makes sense, at least in my mind, as to, what happened to the temple. It's there, then it's gone. God is currently in a temple. We see that in Isaiah chapter 6 very clearly. Where did the temple go? Well, I think the temple is literally going to move. It's going to move. Now, again, they moved London Bridge. It's no longer in London. It's actually at Lake Havasu. So you can go and see London Bridge. I was shocked when I went there, and they're like, this is London Bridge. I'm like, no. Yeah. They said they moved it brick by brick. I'm okay. So if men can move a bridge from London to Lake Havasu, the middle of nowhere, I'm sure God can figure out a way to move his temple from the New Jerusalem down to planet Earth if he so desires. And that seems to be the case. So great question. That's a great question. All right. Hello. All right. Good to see you guys. Awesome. Yep. It was live. So very good. Well, thank you guys for your questions. That was fantastic. Really a pleasure to share these ideas. And I hope it made sense about the New Jerusalem, the shape of the New Jerusalem, and that it's going to be on planet Earth during the millennium and, of course, forever. So thank you for tuning in. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and stay in the Word, you guys. The Bible has the answers. I can't say any more than that. The Bible has the answers. Keep studying it. It will expand your mind. Until next time, God bless.